And then you get crime and insurgency and all of those things. So the CIA's role is not to advise, but to draw some appropriate analogies, to say where things are different, to talk about the levers that the U.S. might have or opportunities the U.S. might have, to point out potential dangers, and to ongoing basis continually assess the situation and provide those continuous updates. Again, never recommending action, but supplying the administration with information that they can use in order to make their own decisions.
We have about 2 minutes left and three really smart people, so I want to make sure we get the opportunity to speak to each of you on this question. We'll start with you, Eduardo. What are you watching for next? What are your specific concerns over Venezuela?
One, I'm watching exactly what Cindy just mentioned. I'm watching the military. I'm watching where the military is going. Is it going to be, in fact, even though they haven't been fired, is it going to fall under Delcy Rodriguez's control? That's one thing. I'm also looking at all of the other factors that are key in this scenario. All of the drug trafficking, all of the paramilitary and quasi-military institutions that still exist. Uh, and I'm also looking, of course, at the opposition. What the opposition. I've listened to Maria Corina Machado's supporters, and I've listened to some of her advisors, and they really don't know what to make of this situation.
Okay, we
So I
want to
think
make sure that we
going
get to our
forward,
other guests and find out what they're looking for. Tim Paget, what do you say? What are you looking for next on this situation? What are you going to be reporting on in South Florida? Do we still have you, Tim?
he's muted.
Tim is muted.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm just waiting to see if Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president, who is a rather hardline member of the socialist regime still, whether she is as compliant with the Trump administration as the Trump administration tells us she's going to be,
Right.
or whether she and the remnants of this regime have figured out that in order to really bring down the whole edifice, it might require a full-blown U.S. invasion with boots on the ground to do that, and that might give her and these hardliners like Diosdado Cabello, the defense minister Vladimir Padrino, more leverage.
Okay. And Cynthia Storr, you have about 15 seconds. Anything in particular that you're looking at?
Yes, I'll be looking to see if the intelligence community as a whole will still be able to provide analysis that may not agree with our current administration.
Great,
Because they've
wonderful.
made it pretty clear that they want support, but
Yeah.
they don't really want,
Gotcha. Well,
other
thank you so
views.
much, Dr. Cynthia Storr, former CIA intelligence analyst, FIU professor Eduardo Gamara, and Tim Paget, the Americans editor at WLRN in Miami. You're listening to Florida Matters, live and local.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Badawi Law, offering legal services in personal injury, immigration, and auto accidents, with offices in Tampa, Florida. Office information and practice details at badawilaw.com, or learn more on Instagram at Badawi Law. Seitenbacher, with a new web shop. Healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door from right here in Tampa Bay. Details at Seitenbacher.com. Seitenbacher. Seitenbacher.
On the next Fresh Air, journalist Jacob Soboroff joins us to talk about his new book, Firestorm, The Great Los Angeles Fires and America's New Age of Disaster. He covered the fires as a reporter while watching his childhood neighborhood, the Pacific Palisades, burn, bringing a deeply personal lens to a national crisis. Join us.
And welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Kathy Carter. Respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, cases in kids have increased at an alarming rate. Maybe your kids are showing flu-like symptoms and shortness of breath or wheezing. Cases are up 111% from November 2024. That's according to doctors at the Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in St. Petersburg. And the increase is coming at a time when influenza cases are normally on the rise. Joining us to talk more about this is Dr. Carlos Abancis. He's the director of St. Joseph's Children's Hospital Emergency and Trauma Center in Tampa. Dr. Abancis, thanks for joining us. If you've got a question for the doctor or want to share any tips for how you can keep your family healthy this winter, give us a call. We have a doctor in the studio. It's a perfect opportunity. 813-755-6562. Or you can email us, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Doctor, why are we seeing an increase in RSV numbers so late in the year?
So every year we have spikes in RSV, and it just kind of depends on when, and it kind of comes around just seasonal, and it just happens to be that different strains will hit at different times. And ever since COVID kind of hit us, we used to have like better time periods where you can almost predict the month that it would hit. But after COVID, for whatever reason, it's kind of changed a little bit of all the systems of when the different viruses hit. But it just happens to be hitting a little bit later this year when it usually tends to hit like November, December. It's hitting a little bit more now this year.
Are cases of the flu just as high right now?
Cases of flus are definitely increasing, and it's predicted to be a much like stronger flu year because what we have this year is a different subclad, so it's called subclad K of like the H3N2 virus. So the H3N2 virus has been around for a long time, so it's not something that just popped up kind of more like COVID. It's been around for a long time. It was actually 1968, the Hong Kong flu was part of that H3N2. But what happens is you almost break off and create like a little separate subset of it, so that's why they call it subclade K. And so we have this newer strain that most of our bodies haven't seen. So when our bodies haven't seen it, we are more prone to kind of get sicker with it. So there should be, and we're expecting there's going to be more widespread, infections with this because our bodies have less immune system to it because we haven't seen it like a lot of the other flu strains where we would have like a partial immunity to it.
Well, have you already experienced RSV or the flu in your home? Did it knock your family down during the holiday season? You can join the conversation, 813-755-6562, or you can email us, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Now, are kids especially vulnerable, or can adults still get RSV?
Oh, anybody can get RSV, and it's highly contagious. The younger and smaller you are, the more problems you have because RSV gets into the lungs and just kind of kills off some of the normal cells there. And it kind of like creates a little debris in the lungs. And that little debris, the smaller your airway passages are, the harder to breathe around that debris. So if you're bigger, you're going to have a bad cold and cough kind of stuff if you're, an adult parent of a child. But like a 1-month-old who has really tiny airways, they can have a lot more problems with it. So it definitely affects the very young and the very old who have a weaker immune system as well. So they're the ones that are most susceptible to having complications from it.
What would you suggest as some of the treatments for the younger set for RSV?
Yeah. So unfortunately, there's no real treatment that works for it. It's a virus, so we don't have any medicines that kill it. So one is prevention, trying to really wash your hands when you go out, try not to be around other people who are sick, but keeping your child just kind of away from people that have been sick, and then just really good hygiene, just kind of washing stuff down. If you're going to be flying, maybe wearing a mask, clean off the little tables areas, those things when you're kind of sitting down when you're flying and traveling. But the biggest thing is going to be is just watching for symptoms of increasing difficulty breathing. So with RSV, kids that start having problems with it, you're going to see that in their side ribs, you'll start seeing the skin suck in between their side ribs, which tells me they're having a difficult time breathing. That's really kind of when we really need to see them in the ER. The cough and congestion is going to be normal, and there's unfortunately no medicine that really works, and there's been really good studies on cough medicines that show that they really don't have any benefit with kids, and it actually can cause a lot more side effects with the heart, lungs. Plus, you have this little debris in your lungs, and the goal of the body is to get that debris out, so they actually have to kind of keep coughing. Now, with RSV, we know that children are always going to get sicker on either day 3, 4, or 5, and then they gradually start getting better. But the cough, because even after the virus dies off in 7 to 10 days, you still have those little bit of debris in your lungs. And so your cough will oftentimes continue with RSV for 14 to 21 days, which is really frustrating to parents because they don't understand why the cough's just not going away. So.
Yeah. Well, like you said, adults can get RSV too. In fact, we have somebody on the line. Chris is on the phone. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, good, thanks.
So what would you like to ask the doctor?
Well, here's the thing. I've had this RSV now. It's been I'm in my 8th or 9th day, and the cough has been really significant, to say the least. It wakes me up in the middle of the night. I'm heavily medicated on all the stuff I can take as far as NyQuil and acetaminophen and ibuprofen and so forth, but I've had to work through it. But now it has actually given me pink eye, conjunctivitis, which I did not expect. And I didn't even know that was possible. And I just wanted to ask you about that. And is there something that I can do that's going to help me with this situation with the conjunctivitis?
Okay, Chris, thank you for that, and we hope you feel better. Doctor, I don't know if you've heard his full question. He said he had all these symptoms, and then he got conjunctivitis, pink eye, and he's like, how did that happen? And he's wondering, is there anything he can do to treat that? And do you see that with RSV?
Yeah, so a couple things that can happen. And one of the really common things we see with kids is that the parents will complain that their kids will have an infection when it's not really infected yet. But what happens is we have the lacrimal gland, so the lacrimal duct. So the lacrimal duct, when you cry, your tears go down from your eyes into your nose and drain into your nose. But in kids, when you have a lot of nasal congestion, it will sometimes back up into the eye. And it doesn't necessarily cause infection, but they'll wake up and they'll have like all the crusting to their eyes. Sometimes their eyes will be a little bit swollen, but their eye's not pink yet. So when you have actually a bacterial infection, conjunctivitis, you usually have that pink eye. But same thing can happen in adults. In adults, when you're sleeping, stuff can back up to your eyes. And then when you kind of wash it off, and after you've been touching it for a while, same thing with kids, when they've been touching it for a while, you oftentimes can get pink eye after having had a little bit of a cold. And the best thing for that is you usually need to have like a prescription antibiotic drops or ointment to kind of put in there. And once you kind of start treating with the ointment, the conjunctivitis should go away. But it is a very frustrating as an adult, like that cough just persists. And oftentimes, when I get sick, I'll just take some generic, just a little cough medicine or Hall's kind of little drops, something like that to just kind of help me with like soothe it a little bit. But there's nothing that actually totally gets rid of it, unfortunately. But the best thing for the conjunctivitis is going to be getting a little a little antibiotic to kind of place in there for it.
All right, Chris, hopefully that will help you out. Let's go to the flu now. Lots of flu cases this season. What can parents do? Because sometimes kids get fevers, and parents get really worried about fevers.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing we always see is I think the biggest fear is always the fever. And so influenza is going to definitely cause fevers, and it's going to cause fevers typically in young kids of 103 to 105, and that's the typical temperature. So then it's very scary for parents when they see a temperature of 104 or 105 because people for so often have been taught that the high fevers cause seizures or that the high fever is going to cause brain damage, but it actually doesn't, and that's the amazing thing. The fever is actually the body's defense to kill off the virus. And so I actually will try to tell parents to not so much treat the fever, but to treat how their child looks and feels. So for example, if a child's got 102 fever, but they're running around playing, it's actually better for them to have the fever because it helps them kill off the virus. If their fever is 101, but they look miserable, feel miserable, then I tell them, hey, then give them a little bit of Motrin and Tylenol so they feel better while their body fights it off. The fever, the thought behind the fevers causing seizures is we do have some genetic conditions that cause febrile seizures. But the amazing thing about febrile seizures is that they only happen on the first day. If you didn't have a didn't have a seizure on the first day, it's just not going to happen as a febrile seizure. If the fever was causing the febrile seizures, the child's still having fevers for 7 to 10 days. They're still having fevers every single day. You would expect the fevers to cause the seizures every single day, but it doesn't. It only happens on the first day, which shows you it's not really the fever causing it. It's usually a genetic predisposition to it.
All right, we're speaking with Dr. Carlos Avances. He's the director of St. Joseph's Children's Hospital's Emergency and Trauma Center in Tampa. We're talking about RSV cases and the flu and how you can keep your family protected. You can call 813-755-6562 or send us a message to FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. Okay, if my child has RSV symptoms, what then? Is there a window to get a vaccine?
So the time to get the vaccine stuff is really beforehand. And that's really the key is trying to get it beforehand. But, looking forward is going to be, especially those really young children, we now have a good vaccine that's going to kind of help prevent these symptoms because especially in the little babies, if they get it, it really puts them at high risk. So kind of getting them vaccinated is something that can be life-saving for a lot of these children. So,
yeah, we talked about just waiting out RSV. But for the flu, any kind of recommendations on how to help that move along quicker?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for the flu is especially kids who are high risk, so kids under the age of 2, kids that have like seizure disorders, asthma, heart conditions, any kind of cancers, especially for them. If we catch in the first 48 hours, we can start them on Tamiflu. So Tamiflu is a medication. We have no medication that kills a virus. But we have medications that decreases growth. So the idea behind Tamiflu is to start it within the first 48 hours in order to decrease how much of the virus grows in their body. So theoretically, if less of it grows, if they were going to get really sick with the flu, they may not get as sick because there's less of it growing in there. The other advantage too is that, like I said, the flu is normally going to last on average 7 to 10 days. So if a child's going to have it for 9 days with Tamiflu, they might only have it for like 8 days or 7 days.
Now, with the vaccination rates for RSV or for the flu, has it changed at a time when Americans are kind of more skeptical about getting a vaccine?
Yeah, so the vaccination rates have dropped significantly, and that's one of the reasons that we're seeing also this kind of increase of the flu and we're expecting a stronger flu season, is that we've seen all the vaccination rates kind of just continue to kind of dwindle down after COVID. And so we're seeing less and less vaccines. So that leaves these opportunities for these other viruses to all of a sudden kind of start growing and creating these other subclades, because we kind of like decrease that herd immunity that we were having before and allow the viruses to start kind of growing more, getting more of a foothold, and then kind of continuing to spread more. And so that's part of one of the rationales why we see more.
You can call 813-755-6562, or you can email us FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Are there different recommendations for the elderly for RSV or the flu?
I do pediatrics.
Okay.
So I know more about the pediatric stuff. I know for the elderly, there is a vaccine for them to kind of help because, like I said, again, as we get older, our body's immune system is a little bit different, and we have a little bit more trouble with the breathing. And so trying to prevent someone who's elderly from getting it, especially if they have grandkids and going to be around grandkids, it's a great idea to kind of get so that you don't kind of go on to kind of get RSV.
Well, if you were bummed out by this conversation with RSV and the flu, you told me before the show that there's actually a pretty bad stomach virus going around right now. But can you tell us about that and how parents can look out and help protect their kids against that virus?
Yeah. So again, with like all the viruses, the biggest thing is hand washing, just really hand washing kind of thing. And that's going to be your biggest thing. Now, if your child has the stomach virus, vomiting, diarrhea, always get asked what to do so the other kids don't get it in the household. And the biggest thing is going to be washing them and kind of trying to keep them isolated to one little area, because oftentimes we forget that kids will have a little vomiting or diarrhea and then they'll be in a different area, but they'll touch the remote or they'll touch the refrigerator door, and then someone else goes and touches that same area and they can kind of get it. And then usually the stomach viruses, they can sometimes live on surfaces for like 10 days to 14 days. So they actually live a little bit longer than even the flu viruses on surfaces. And so really kind of cleaning stuff really good is really important. But the most important thing with vomiting and diarrhea is hydration. And it's really important to just kind of keep kids really hydrated. And same thing with the flu when they have high fevers, because when you have high fevers, it's just like if you go and like do yard work outside in the summertime in Florida, you need more fluids. With that 103 fever, 104 fever, you need more fluids. So both of them require a lot of fluids. If they're having a lot of vomiting, the good news is we do have a medicine we can give them for vomiting, which is Zofran. For diarrhea, we typically don't. We tell people not to give any medicines for diarrhea. The problem with the medicines for diarrhea is that, one, it causes some increased pain.
We're going to have to cut you off with that, but thank you for that quick note about the medication. Up next, you're going to hear a local author's quest to find out the truth behind the death of her father. You're listening to Florida Matters Live and Local. Stay with us. Thank you, Dr. Carla Sabances.
Thank you.
I'm Robin Young. Ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is in a court in New York today to face drug and weapons charges. We'll have the latest on that. Hear from expats thrilled about his deposing but worried about their country's future. And also ask, who is running Venezuela? Next time, Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
Hunger may be right next door. Nearly 220,000 people in your community struggle to afford food. You can join All Faiths Food Bank to end hunger in Sarasota and DeSoto counties. Learn more at allfaithsfoodbank.org.
Want to know what's happening here in the Capitol? I'm Douglas Soul, covering the state government for Your Florida. Visit WUSF.org/YourFlorida.
WUSF reveals how government decisions affect people in our community, like a federal worker in Tampa who went without pay because of the shutdown.
To be completely honest, I feel ashamed to be an American citizen right now. I mean, who does this to their own essential workers?
When you listen to WUSF, you get a more complete view of our community.
Welcome back to Florida Matters, live and local. I'm Kathy Carter. Artis Henderson was just 5 years old when she was badly injured in a plane crash that killed her father. For years, it was simply referred to by her family as the accident. But little else was talked about after that day. Not her father's childhood, growing up poor on a farm in rural Georgia, and nor his eventual involvement in drug smuggling in Miami in the 1970s and early 80s. Instead, after the plane crash, Henderson's mother broke contact with her father's family and friends. The two fled their former life to begin a new one in Fort Myers. She still lives there today. And in her memoir, No Ordinary Bird, Drug Smuggling, a Plane Crash, and a Daughter's Quest for the Truth, Artis Henderson tries to solve the mystery of her father's life and death. Artis, thank you for joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local.
Thank you for having me.
You were so young when your father died in 1985. He was piloting his small private plane, a Piper Cub. It crashed on your family's property in northern Georgia. What do you remember about that day?
So little. What I remember most clearly is being in the plane. Just a few minutes, really seconds before we crashed. I remember asking my father, "Daddy, are we going to crash?" And he said, "No, baby, sit back down." And then the next thing I remember is being carried away from the plane and looking back and seeing the plane crumpled on the ground.
And now you were laid up for quite some time as well. Do you remember any of that?
Yeah, I was in the hospital for a long time. I had some very serious spinal injuries, a concussion, multiple surgeries on my back. For a long time, they didn't think I would live, and they didn't think I would walk. I remember it being very painful in the hospital, very painful.
Well, as an adult, you began reconstructing the life of the father you barely remember. You say almost everything you learned about your father, Lamar Chester, was through extensive research, which makes sense, you're a journalist, through news articles, court filings, and lots of interviews. Tell us about that process.
It was a very lengthy process. Start to finish, the book took about 10 years. The first, I'd say, well, the majority of it, the first major chunk of it was reporting. And then when I started writing, the intensity of the writing. Sometimes, it's complicated because this story is so personal, but it's also deeply reported. And I sometimes wonder if, because it was my own family, if that gave me a certain tenacity that maybe someone who was more removed from the story wouldn't have had, because it's a lot of reporting, a lot of digging.
Yeah. Well, how did your father's involvement with drug smuggling begin?
I think it began the way it did for a lot of pilots really in that time. So many people were involved in marijuana smuggling, especially in the early days of drug smuggling. And my father was a pilot for Eastern, and he wanted to make some extra money, and he knew someone who was hiring pilots to fly down to Jamaica and then Colombia.
Now, you said that your father did not sell the product. He just often referred to himself as the transportation guy. Tell us about that.
Exactly. My father, he would have a drink here and there, but he had tried marijuana, but he wasn't a big smoker. He wasn't a user. He wasn't a consumer, I should say. And he sort of justified the moving of marijuana in two ways. One, he didn't have a big problem with marijuana itself as a product,
Mm-hmm.
but mostly he said he was doing what pilots do. He was just moving cargo from one location to another.
And we should say in the 70s when he got started, everyone in Miami, it seems, was enjoying marijuana. It wasn't seen as something severe as it later became during the Reagan era and the war on drugs. If you're just joining us, we are speaking with Artis Henderson. She's the author of No Ordinary Bird: Drug Smuggling, a Plane Crash, and a Daughter's Quest for the Truth. If you'd like to weigh in, you can call 813-755-6562 or email us FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Artis, as you said, your father started working for drug smugglers, but he eventually got more and more involved and grew his own enterprise, hiring friends and family, buying more planes, and eventually a private island in the Bahamas so his planes could refuel. Tell us about that juncture in his life.
Yeah, that was the moment when his business really, it just grew exponentially. Because before that, they were limited, especially in terms of fuel. But once they had this place in the Bahamas, this halfway stopping point between Colombia and South Florida, they could refuel, they could wait out bad weather, and they could move so much more marijuana. So right after that point, my father and his team really began bringing in large amounts, very large amounts of marijuana.
And large amounts of money were made because of that. We said at the beginning of the story that your plane crashed in North Georgia. That's because your father bought a country house in North Georgia. It was almost like a resort, high rolling in Miami at the time. In one scene of your book, your father doles out stacks of cash to members of his operation at the infamous Mutiny Club in Miami, which was an inspiration for a scene in the movie Scarface.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's funny because so many people often want to make the reference, the comparison of my father and Al Pacino in Scarface. But of course,
No, nothing like
times.
that. Right. Yeah. But what may have that scene looked like? You paint a picture in your book about that. What was that like at that time?
Which one? The Scarface?
No, the Mutiny Club.
Oh, yes. I mean, the mutiny was, from what I understand, I mean, goodness gracious, I was so little. Although I do remember one lovely dinner there when I was very young and having raspberry ice cream seemed very decadent in the mid 80s. But yeah, the mutiny was just such a place. I mean, it was politicians, Richard Nixon, it was rock stars, it was movie stars. Everyone was at the mutiny. It was so hedonistic. I mean, again, the 80s, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of 1988, there is a picture of you with your dad from October of that year. You're just 4 months old when that picture was taken. And you write about that picture, I want to freeze my dad in this moment to say to him, enough. I want to tell him to cash out. Tell us how you imagine that conversation might be.
Yeah, it is an exercise in the imagination because I fantasize about that. But my father, from what I've learned about him, would never have cashed out. He would have seen this all the way through to the end. And I think the way it ended was not what he anticipated, but maybe it was one of the only options.
Well, 3 years after that picture was taken, federal prosecutors unsealed a 36-count indictment charging your dad and 11 others with drug racketeering. What did you learn through your research about that time in your father's life?
Yeah, I mean, the essence of a good story is change, right? So we talk about the Mutiny Club and this hedonistic lifestyle, but it stands out because that all quickly, it's this peak, and then our whole life changed. The government took essentially everything my father owned.
Why do you think your father was such a risk taker?
Such a good question. I spent many years trying to figure this out, and I think it was in him. I think it is just in some people, and I think it was the way he was built. And I think if he had different access to different opportunities, I think his life would have looked very different. But I think he made what he could with what he had.
You paint a picture in your book about a time when he was young where he had a job diving into bodies of water and golf courses to retrieve balls for the rich golfers. Do you think growing up poor might have had something to do with his ambitions?
Absolutely. Or and largely uneducated, it left such an imprint on him. He wanted something different for him, but also for his children.
Right, right. He sent your oldest brother to, college and med school and was very proud of that. It was upper mobility for him. Well, your story, No Ordinary Bird, does read like a crime thriller, but of course, very much a memoir. And you write that sometimes you imagine how you might be healed if you were able to have a conversation with him. But then you say that's a dangerous thought. Why do you say that?
Yeah. Because then I have to think of everything else he missed and I missed.
Well, one of the blessings, though, you say, about writing this memoir is the relationship you've been able to cultivate with your older siblings from your father's first marriage. How did that begin? How did it evolve with that you have this wonderful family?
Yeah, it's been amazing. Because this was such a secret, always growing up, we never talked about my father, but in the process of reporting this book, we talked a lot about my dad, and I met my brother, my middle brother, who I had not seen since I was a child, and he is so dear to me. And now I have this family. Beautiful.
Well, it was a really, really fun read. I'm sorry for everything that you went through, but you were able to channel it into this book, No Ordinary Bird, Drug Smuggling, a Plane Crash, and a Daughter's Quest for the Truth. I hope it was an exercise in helping you heal a little bit, Artis Henderson. And thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for spending the time to talk to us on Florida Matters Live and Local.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Well, before we end our conversation today, we want to update you on a topic we talked about earlier this hour. Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro declared himself innocent and a decent man earlier this hour. That was in a New York courtroom. And in just a few minutes, here and now, we'll provide you with the latest on Maduro and the hearing where he pleaded not guilty. Again, you will hear that coming up in special coverage on NPR and WUSF. That is our show for today. Florida Matters. Executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producers are Amelie Horse and Quincy Walters. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Gio Gavin, and Jackson composes the music to our show. Warren Buckles handled the video. You can subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch as well on WUSF's YouTube channel. I'm Kathy Carter. Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon, and remember, all of the coverage on Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro will continue throughout the afternoon here at WUSF 89.7, your spot for local. Thank you for listening and watching.
Trade, climate, security. To understand major international issues, you need a global perspective. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Deepen your understanding. Listen to The World every weekday.
You can hear The World today at 3. You're listening to WUSF 89.7 Tampa, broadcasting from studios at USF Tampa and USF Sarasota Manatee.
Funding for WUSF comes from listeners like you, and also Tampa General Hospital, the region's only academic health system. Together with USF Health Morsani College of Medicine, TGH delivers groundbreaking innovation and life-saving care. For more information, visit tgh.org. Sarasota Art Museum celebrates 100 years of Art Deco. Explore the history of this